And I'm happy to give the floor to Caroline, who will introduce herself and talk about what actually she is doing in this domain and what her experiences are. So Caroline, up to you.
Thank you. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Caroline from Belfius, and thank you for having me here as speaker. You can give my next slide.
So we will start with the poll first to see if it's working, because we're going to do that a couple of times more. So you see the poll question here, and then you can submit one of the choices to. Okay, so sorry about that, Caroline, but now we will move to your slide. Let me see. Here we are.
Okay, you can go on with my next slide. So good morning. I'll start all over again. I'm Caroline. You can give me my next slide. I hope you all know Belfius. Belfius is a company, of course, owned by Belgian government. Excuse me. And at the right, you see some key numbers of us. We're very proud to be embedded in the Belgian society. And actually, our key slogan, our key strategy is to be meaningful and inspiring for the Belgian society. So I hope I don't have to tell you what we exactly do. We do banking, of course, within Belgium. Now, let me tell you something you might not know yet. Belfius is a group. And the center of it all is Belfius Bank, and we have a number of daughter companies. We do lease, auto lease. We also own Crevius. But one of those biggest companies that we own is Belfius Insurance. At first sight, you might say I'm not that familiar with Belfius Insurance, but let me give you the next slide, and then probably you will recognize something. So this might give you a hint. Belfius Insurance, you do know it. What we do there is we offer insurances to Belfius clients, but we also have, as a Belfius Insurance brand, we offer insurance directly also to big companies and corporates. We do also own DVV insurances. I don't know if you know the DVV network, especially people living in Flanders might get familiar of that in the streets. They are also selling insurances, and only insurances from Belfius. And then we have we always call it the little sister, Corona Direct, doing direct insurance. You might say, oh God, they have a bad name today, Corona Direct, but I don't know if you know, but actually they're doing quite well. And they are a bit our innovation hub when it comes to architecture. It's not only on products, they do the crazy things like the dog insurance, but from an architecture point of view, they're also a bit when we want to try something out, we do it with Corona Direct. Now, who am I? I'm Caroline from Belfius. This is me. As you can see, I'm a woman, so I think that is already a bit particular in our world. I'm also a mother and a wife of an entrepreneur. But most importantly, I have been working for Belfius already for 13 years. I've been working both on bank side and insurance side, so I know the company quite well. Always in IT, but I think I did IT of almost everything. And I think about 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, we created in Belfius a new department. We called it IT Together, in which we have put all strategic departments considering IT or related to the IT. And as you can see here, I gave some examples. It obviously has the architecture department, but also our digital security and our cloud infrastructure is there, and the vendor management. So we are the guys doing the strategy. And so we made there one good team, and we work for mainly bank and insurance, but we also give guidance in the architecture of the whole Belfius group. Now, when I started in my job, well, actually, one of the first things they asked me is for a big auditorium of all people of Belfius, but like the business, the ones that didn't have a lot of experience in IT projects, and I had to explain them what my department was doing. And I think you all already tried this once in your career, is to make the comparison between an architect, what we do, and the architect that normal people know, I think, being the one that is building their house. So I kind of made at that time, and you can see it here on the slide, a comparison between, okay, what is an IT architect compared to you when you build a house? I mean, when you build a house, you know what you want, but you don't know how to do it. And actually, that is what we do. As architects, they have an idea, they have a strategic idea, but they don't know really how to put it in practice. And then we help them to design it. We don't do it, but we help them design it. Shortly after this was quite successful. I had my first talk with the CIO of Balfius Group. And actually, we talked about my mission statement, and it was quite clear that the mission statement of our department was not to do architectures of houses. No, we had to be much more ambitious, and our ambition was to do urbanism, in fact. And here came, of course, obviously, our mission statement is to go from architectures to urbanism. And can I have my next slide, and then I'll explain you what was the theory we made about it and how we did it. So this is a bit the drawing that we have at Balfius when we talk about the strategy in architecture. You probably recognize some flavors of Archimate and Togaf in there. We got a lot of inspiration a bit everywhere, and we gave it our own flavor. But let me explain the drawing. For us, it's a strategy. A strategy always starts with corporate level, the highest level, and then you go down. From that corporate strategy, you have for certain domains or specific product groups a strategy. Then comes your product ideation, and from that we get real projects that we execute or programs. So we go down. The highest level is enterprise, the middle is domain, and the lowest level is the program or project level. And we want to do architecture at each of those levels. So at the lowest, we call that solution architecture. In the middle, we do domain architecture, so the scope of a domain. And at the highest level, of course, we have what we call enterprise architecture. Now, we always say our ambition is to do it at 3 levels: the business level, the application level, and the technology level. I think you all know it's a bit a challenge. We all come from the past, from architects that are very technology and application oriented, but we also already started to do the business, to model the business, the data of the business, etc. Now, especially for this discussion, I added to the right horizon solution architecture that is now. I think we're all quite familiar. A solution architect, when he comes to you and he has a question he wants the answer today. If you tell him, give me a couple of days, it's already, you're blocking my project. Domain architectures for us, it's in a time horizons 1 to 3 years. We try to make an evolution of the domain as is to be, and we create kind of roadmap, but we try to arrive, when we attack a domain, we do want to have a roadmap that is finished in a couple of years. Decisions at enterprise architectures or strategies we make there, it's always within a horizon 5 to 10 years. If I dare to tell something that takes more than 10 years, I don't have to start with it at all. So. Now, this is a very nice theory, but let me tell you something about the reality at Balfius. And can I have my next slide? At Balfius, we have a management board, both at bank and insurance side, which has a very clear vision. We have visionaries there who really know what to do. So when you see these things I show here on these slides in the marketing, in our in the newspapers or online on LinkedIn, this is not just marketing. These are things that comes directly from the management board. They're like, I always call them my dream factory, my ideation factory. They're really good. Now, when the reality of this is that when they have an idea like this, they really know how to do it and what they want. So to give you an example, it's our management board that gives every quarter the top 15 projects we have to realize. So they do prioritization, they do take a lot in hand. They are a very strong management board when it comes to. Now the result of this is that when this is a corporate strategy, we immediately go to the project phase. So we kind of skip the domain level at the strategy part. It does happen, but it happens in the heads of some very important people, but it's not formalized, which makes it quite difficult for us to do domain architecture. Now, if I can have my next slide, is we didn't say, okay, then let's do nothing. We had two options. The first option is change the company. I don't know if you already tried that, but that is something that takes time. You feed something, an idea. So what I did is I used this presentation to feed some ideas, but at the same time, I didn't want to wait. So what we did is we did a bottom-up approach. We took the corporate strategy ideas, but at the same time, we know all the projects that are happening. And we took a bottom-up. So from all those projects that are being initiated, from all those ideas that come from the management board, we made ourselves a domain architecture backlog. And we started to prioritize. So 1 year ago, we started with the backlog, we prioritized it, and we started to make and deliver the domain architectures. Now, this is the way how we work.
Pourquoi chaque fois je ferme la porte et ça fait 2 fois que je remets les coussins. J'en dis mais c'est quoi ce bordel?
Thank you. So for us, it's also the proof. It's to show. We prove today, and we start proving what the domain architecture is. We delivered it, and as today we already see it. We see that people of the management board, the last months started to talk about we need a domain architecture first to do this. So we delivered it, we showed it, and from that we are changing the company. And we are confident that we are really doing this in a good way. Now, as I already explained it a bit, we didn't enforce this by governance and processes and procedures. The main important thing is that I have a fantastic team that knows Belfius. They have a network. They know all the people in Belfius from top to down, and that is very important. They do it with the relations we have every day. And the second thing is communication. When we started this, we had a lot of marketing. When we delivered the domain architecture, we did do the marketing, we did the roadshow, we did etc. And that is the two things we did to make this a success story, I think. So thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope I have been meaningful and inspiring for you to do this. Thank you very much.
So thanks, Caroline, for opening the breakfast session. And I think it's indeed a very clear and transparent view on how you take this up within Belfius. And it's very nice to hear that. So before we move to the next presentation of Chris Peltier, and we will do a switch because he will take over the screen. But before we do that, we will launch the poll for a next question. So on that question, do you have a domain architect in your organization? 76% of the people participating, and we are above 80, are saying yes, and 23% is saying no. So that's this one, and then I have another one before we go to Chris. And I have to do in the right order. Do you have domain architects defined in your organization? Yes, no, or but only for a few domains. It's a nice result. Something more than half are answering yes. And then we have 30% saying yes, but only for a number of domains. Okay, thanks for doing this poll. And now I hand over the presentation to Chris.
Thanks very much. Let's see if we can get things going. Caroline, very good. Thanks for that. All right. Are we okay? Everybody sees it?
Yes.
Great. All right. We don't have too much time, so I'll get right to it. We're going to talk a little bit about business-driven roadmaps from a business architect perspective as an agent of change. So we're going to focus on what roles a business architect, transformational leaders play in that process. It's a very pivotal role and a little bit about thinking outside the normal kind of architecture domain, which is really required to make it happen. So let's go through a little bit about me. You can read it another time. I've been working for 30 years now, and I've been very fortunate to work across a lot of industries. Lately, quite a lot with business architecture, with companies. I've worked with some of the people on the call, so I'll try. Hopefully you won't recognize anything I have to say, good or bad. So business architecture, a little bit about some new skills, dealing with uncertainty, which is really important when dealing with roadmaps. Some of the characteristics, you can read them, some readiness and resilience, those sorts of things, and how to keep it an active canvas on which you continue to make changes and evolve your strategy and your way forward. So let's just do a quick fact check on the business architect. Fact one, usually in most organizations, business architecture is not very well defined, not understood as a value contributor to change. That's changing quite a lot, which is good. The business architect also quite often, and I know I'm talking to a lot of IT people, and I've been working with a lot of CIOs in the past, so it's slightly controversial perhaps, but the business architect has often been under the enterprise architecture CIO umbrella, which gives it a little bit of a IT-driven, IT roadmap kind of flavor. Fact three is the really important one, that business architecture really is an enterprise view of the business. So it's representing all aspects of the organization in partnership with IT and other groups. So business and operations, but also the whole ecosystem of customers and partners as well. A quote from Wendy Kuhn, perhaps some of you know, very strong in the business architecture community, that the business architect provides a pivotal role as a guide. And we're going to talk about storytelling for an organization and the importance of how a roadmap helps us with that kind of storytelling. The creating chaos, taking order out of the chaos, that's a part of the tools that we have. You can see some of the BizBock and the kind of tools that business architecture uses, but really roadmaps are one of the key tools that I think we all end up doing roadmaps of some sort. But this is one, if you're talking about strategy to execution, transformation of an organization, it's very, very important. So what does it do? It brings a communication tool to reduce the complexity. That's classic architecture type stuff anyway, but it tells a story and it allows us the ability to think a little bit differently. The business architect is really carbon neutral, let's say, representing all stakeholders. So that's the important thing. They're not there representing one side or the other. They're bringing all perspectives to the table. So you have a flexibility to work. We're not going to talk about a specific kind of roadmap, because it really is a hybrid of the methods that you need to use to inspire and guide the organization that you're working for. So you have to keep in mind that I think because of that lack of knowledge, business architecture and some of these business-driven roadmaps will be quite new for the community that you're working with and some of the management teams. So getting across that the value-centric perspective is what the roadmap is bringing. It's trying to give a comprehensive view of the transformation. Yes, you bring in certain elements, more key elements, and yes, you're orchestrating the change, but in a way that's telling a story to your audience. And there's a lot about a trust gap. The business side looks at from the business. They're not sure about the IT. The IT side's not sure about the business. Operations just wants to be left alone. So these kind of transformation roadmaps or business-driven roadmaps ensure that we all have a place to go and look and understand how we have a sustainable change, adaptability, and value generation there that is incremental and updated quite often. So the takeaway here, the first one, we know the business architect designs a blueprint, again, with Caroline's analogy to something that people can really attach to. That's true from strategy to execution. But the business-driven roadmap, that's the comprehensive business-driven approach to achieve that business strategy. Okay, so it's across all the internal silos, it's across the ecosystem of customers and partners as well, and you're bringing all these elements in. So in order to do that, transformation leaders need to have some new skills, let's say. Not the traditional necessarily modeling skills. Yes, this is the foundation, you need these, but you need to be more business-centric when creating these, a storyteller. And in fact, it's a scientific fact that when you're telling a story, that people actually have a chemical response to it. They're listening, and it's more than just being, told something. If you have a story that gives a line through it that has a start, middle, and end, then it resonates more, and it's more long-lasting. Also, features around leadership, having a safe environment, getting everybody's opinion on the canvas, not a consensus, but everybody's opinion and view as a single point, and other things as well. A therapist and coach. Why? Because transformations cause anxiety and stress and change. For leadership, it's an uncertainty, which we're going to talk about, because many organizations still have a punitive approach to, well, you have to succeed or else, and that causes some issues. And for people, when you're talking about transformation, what I find quite often is that there's fear and anxiety. Do I lose my job? Things are going to change. Will I be able to do, the way of working of the future? So that's a very actually important role. There's other things, technologists as opposed to a technician. There's a lot of great, smart people on the call, I'm sure, on a technical level. But really what you want to be able to bring to bear is this new kind of industrial revolution 4.0 stuff. So understanding how technology will create value for the organization. And one, again, because the business architect needs to bring lots of perspectives, going into market and financial areas is also very important as a key feature. ESG, if some of you might have heard about, environmental, social, governance, investment, is a massive opportunity. So if you're working on a project, you need to bring in these other elements to make sure that you're planning for a future that's bigger than a project or a delivery, but a future that is delivering to the strategy. So the takeaway is that there are a few disciplines, and some of these are called soft skills, but I can guarantee you they're not so soft. They're difficult to be nuanced about and to work with. It takes a certain kind of attitude, person, I think history in order to do. So they're not so soft and not so easy, but it's a little bit of art and science, and we're going to have a look at that now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about uncertainty, because that's what roadmaps, maturity models. I love doing roadmaps, actually. It provides freedom to bring in lots of elements, but there's a certain amount of uncertainty as you look over the grand arc of time, whether you're doing a 1 year, 2, 3, 5, 10 year, as Caroline mentioned. If you're that far out these days with the rapid change of technology and business, I think I've seen far too many situations where the ambiguity is causing paralysis. And so there's a certain amount of uncertainty that you have to be able to help people work through, because uncertainty means risk of failure. There's certain fears. So if you're hearing any of this stuff when you're doing your roadmap, or you're trying to plan that view, like we're going to build it, we'll have a consensus view. No, that's not going to work, I can tell you now. All right. So you need a leadership there to drive it. Other things like, what level do we go to? This is a classic one I'm sure we've all suffered from. It's one of my favorites, because it's like every discussion about either a process model or a capability model or some other kind of view of the business. Well, what level are we at? We level 2, we level 3, nobody can agree. It's all subjective. And again, that's a blocking thing. If you're worried about, are we 6.7 versus 8.3 FTE at a certain point in time? Okay, all this stuff, no waste. That's another key one that I heard in my last mission quite a lot. Oh, we can't do anything that we waste. We just don't do anything. And also, using sprints to run transformation is another one. So all these kind of things, you know, you're already in the deep end of the pool of indecision and paralysis because you're trying to work out certainty when there is uncertainty. And that's not the way to do it, to try to figure the uncertainty out. It's to be okay with the uncertainty. So what the canvas does and the roadmap does is it gives decision makers that courage to face the uncertainty. Say, look, there's an ambiguity as we roll out, right? But that's okay because we're going to have a process to align ourselves. But we also have to give people confidence that they can see in one kind of instance, the whole kind of bigger picture and their place in it, that there is a plan and that we have a direction and it's aligned to the strategy and it's actually aligned to the work that I'm doing. So it provides that single point where people can believe and reduce and mitigate that uncertainty. And we do that through going into the organization, doing your storytelling. Again, as Caroline said, you do your marketing, you do your roadshow, but you also do your one-on-ones and you talk to people. Okay, so don't dwell on the ambiguity. And I think as an example, we can maybe look at Jeff Bezos. You know, when he's setting up his selling some books online, was he sitting around going, okay, 10 years from now, I'm going to have, you know, streaming content and I'm going to have, you know, AWS? No. So what he did was to use those other skills and to have a certain amount of ability to deal with uncertainty and then to react. And so let's talk about some of the characteristics that are important for people like that. This is another quote that I use quite a lot, and I believe in completely, from Jack Welch. You just pick a direction and you implement like hell. Okay, you don't sit around and plan too much about it. I know there's probably a lot of planners out there. Planning's good, but at some point you have to pick a direction in that uncertainty and ambiguity and go. Okay, and for somebody to do that and successfully, you need to build a roadmap with somebody like a battlefield commander. You know, they have to be somebody that can drive that forward with confidence, that people can trust, that communicates a story, that inspires people to follow it, and then has empathy when people don't understand it or are afraid of the changes that are coming. That's one side of somebody driving it. The other side is that it's about the roadmap itself. A successful one is about, you know, it's 50-50, pick a random number, right? It's art and science, basically, is the story, okay? It has to have organizational participation. You constantly adjust and tune it, so that's the planning element, but up to the point that you can see, not beyond into the ambiguity so much. There should be a motion to it, a sense of motion and time, and things are moving forward and maturing. Multiple dimensions depending on your needs. Again, not a fixed do these tuk 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 and that's it for every single roadmap. That's not what I'm talking about. It should show that grand arc of the story. So management should be able to understand it. Technical people should be able to understand it. Operations people should be able to understand it. And it gives some kind of aspirational direction and inspiration to achieve it. So this is an excellent tool that is going to help drive readiness of the organization for this transformation, and also build the resilience and capacity that's necessary to get to achieve. So we'll take a little deviation just for human factors, because we're talking a lot about people, and the roadmap itself is about changes that people are going to have to deal with, and you're going to have to deal with people if you're going to have a successful transformation. So just a couple of points. Change, it starts with the individual's perception, right? And in fact, 95% of decisions are kind of subconscious, and we're actually backfilling those. So what we see in the initial feeling we get makes that decision. So an effective roadmap needs to be simple and a realistic visualization that you, again, tells a story that you can guide somebody through, de-escalates their fear and anxiety, and shows them where they are. So they're included, they're not excluded. It's not an ivory tower exercise. It's something that everybody can latch onto. So here's one example, okay? It looks more
So,
complex.
Chris, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Can you look at the time, because I think we need a little bit speed up.
Okay, no
if
problem.
that's possible.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. So here's one example. It has the business strategy on the top. It's over three horizons, which are basically 3 years. It's detailed because there's a lot of text that actually explains what's going on, although we're not zooming in. And it goes down from operations, which was very important for them, business architecture with a connection layer into projects. And you can see on the bottom, projects are being delivered during those horizons. Another one was a capability model across 13 different capability gaps. Again, maturing it. This was another view put together by a lot of people. Quickly, we'll go to readiness and resilience. The models need to be okay. So the models need to also focus on other elements. So not just kind of classical building blocks, but think about the mental model. If you're moving from an organization to something more that's more of an ecosystem model, what's the mental model? Or where are we focused in terms of customer to decentralized? What's the value creation? How are we creating value now? How do we want to do it in the future? Again, orientation, culture. Culture is extremely important. So how do we move the culture to a different place? Usually I do a little thing on Maslow's pyramid of motivation. So you go from, are you delivering to your customers? Yes. Are they satisfied? That's even better. Are you generating value for my customers? And we love you guys. We're BFF forever. So let's talk about business 4.0. We're almost at the end. The roadmap is essential to drive. And what I mean by business 4.0 is that we are now in a third tipping point in Industrial Revolution 4.0, however you want to call it, but it's the convergence of AI, automation, all these different technologies, and we have to be able to sense and adapt to this volatility that's out there. That's why I say don't sit on the ambiguity of the future view. Be able to adapt now, plan now, and adapt for change. So you can go through this after the brief, but being adaptable and again having the roadmap, building in resilience will be helpful there. And how do you do it? You have to embed a process that senses and changes. So this is what we're talking about. The roadmap isn't a one-off. It's something that lives. It's something you have to keep responding to. I'm not going to read all these, but there's a process that you might see it in marketing, but it's also a control theory process. It helps with volatility, predictability. So there are 3 phases. It's a scenario based, do your scenarios, rehearse the outcomes, and adapt. Okay, so in the end, the business-driven roadmap, it's got to guard against organizational sectarianism. So you want a horizontal view, you want inside and out. It has to guard against asymmetry. It's not just purely a project-based building blocks. There's an overall strategy and a future state. And it needs to be really storytelling. Again, because I can't overemphasize that enough, that it has to tell a story that resonates with people, that they understand that there's a whole line through it that helps the transformation be successful, because all transformation has to do with people. People will make that successful or not. So if they can see something, if they have a single point to focus on, then they'll get there in the end. It doesn't matter if you deliver it on time and under budget if nobody accepts it. So there's no right version. The only right version is the version that is going to work for you and your organization. But use these elements and this kind of thinking in order to build that model for the organization and keep it running. Okay, so be an agent of change. So there are some poll questions.
Yeah,
so I give you
because I need to take over the control again. Let me see. I prefer that maybe we can do the poll at the end,
sure.
if we still have time. And that let me first introduce Jean-François Collin. Jean-François, good morning. Thanks for being with us as well.
Good morning.
Jean-François is Chief Architect Business Solutions at Euroclear. Tons of experience, I would say, from out this role. And I propose, Jean-François, that you start to introduce yourself while I'll take it over the control again and put the presentation online. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Ludo. Good morning. So I'm JF. I'm a team lead in enterprise architecture at Euroclear, and reporting to the chief architect Frank Mitchell. In practice, I'm in charge of a team of enterprise architects, domain architects, and some solution architects who oversee the evolution of Euroclear business solutions. I've been at Euroclear for quite a long time, always working in IT. And basically what I want to share today with you is a bit of the recent experience we had in Euroclear with the setup of the new EA function, how we delivered value to the organization by charting the path towards the group ambitions, but also some learnings and next steps. And amongst other, I will insist on maybe the key role of domain architecture to bridge strategy to execution. While the slide comes, maybe some words about Euroclear very quickly. Euroclear is a leading provider of financial market infrastructure post-trade services. So we are part of financial market infrastructure, hence heavily regulated, and we offer post-trade services globally to a large ecosystem of clients worldwide. The value we deliver to this ecosystem is mostly about bringing cost and process efficiencies, about reducing operational risk, and helping customers to optimize their collateral and liquidity on a global basis. So we're not purely a commercial driven company, we're an infrastructure serving the market for the good of the market. What you need to know as well is Euroclear is actually a group. It is made of several companies. We call them entities, who are basically focusing on a given market or given country. But also Euroclear Bank, which is more an international CSD with a more global span, and also the parent company Euroclear SA, where most of the corporate functions reside, including our team, Enterprise Architecture. We can move to the next slide, maybe. So about our journey. Our journey in terms of architecture. Well, without entering too much detail, we just started or restarted a new EA function. And that happened in the context of a wider IT transformation that was launched in 2019. New IT leadership, new CIO, new transformational ambitions. After, I have to say, a rather long period of stability or more incremental evolutions to the company. The starting point for architecture was actually a set of well-established but dispersed solution architecture team, also business architecture team. But given the new ambitions in terms of transformation, there was a real need to adopt a more comprehensive architecture practice. The mandate we got from the CIO, the new group CIO, was actually to link better strategy to execution and to act as a guardian of the successful delivery of the strategy and the desired business outcomes. So this is how we started the journey. Maybe moving to the next slide to cover what we mean by this more comprehensive architecture practice. And you will recognize this diagram because it's not that different from the one that Caroline just showed. Basically, how does enterprise architecture help chart the path? Well, it's about bringing to a proactive engagement with quite a lot of stakeholders at all possible levels. It's about bringing clarity on the objective, the priorities, the journey, the approach, and even the solution directions in order to achieve the desired goals. And this needs to happen at 3 levels, each of them addressing different types of horizons. The strategic level, 3 to 5 years, it's about setting the vision, the direction for the enterprise, defining the what and the why for the investments. The planning level, a little bit more midterm, 6 to 18 months or maybe 2 years. This is more about turning the vision into an executable plan within the domain, but also in alignment across domains. It's about the how you deliver the strategy. And finally, execution level, where enterprise architecture is there to guide and verify and the actual execution of the strategy through projects, epics, or the like. These three levels correspond to different activities within the EA team, that are led by distinct roles in the team, and they are in bold on the diagram. And these people actually, to do their job, they need to engage. They need to engage their stakeholders across the organization. From this diagram, you can already see the pivotal role that domain and the business architects actually play in translating from the strategic level to the execution level. And I'll further expand on that on the next slide, maybe sharing our experience across these three levels of thinking. So moving on, zooming first at the strategic level. In 2019, we engaged the senior leadership across the whole company to co-create a 3 to 5 years strategic investment plan. So basically, we approach about 16 business units and service lines, meeting the CEOs of the entities, their management committees, at entity level and at group level as well, meeting the division heads, risk, finance, compliance, their management team, engaging the IT leadership. All of these conversations were focusing on basically understanding their business unit strategic objectives, understanding the capabilities that were at stakes, and also discussing about value, business value versus maturity or ability to start for the various investment teams. These dialogues were actually the important part of the job, but it was backed by, I would say, a standard and structured process. So we capture all of that content through a standard framework in order to be in a position to really derive, in the end, an investment plan 3 to 5 years for each of the business unit. The last step was really to assemble all of that more at enterprise level and to start optimizing. So looking at where we can realize synergies across business unit, across strategies, and I'll expand to that on the next slide. But basically, all of that work led to a global investment plan, which was fed into the portfolio governance for execution. And it was the first time we ran such a, I would say, ambitious exercise at Euroclear, the very first time. And the team gained quite some credit by the value that this exercise delivered in terms of reconnecting really the investment portfolios of the entity to the 5-year strategy of the whole group. So through that journey, we also started to formulate a target architecture, which was not really existing at the enterprise level, introducing a number of shared business capabilities, transversal digital foundations, it's about public cloud, data platform, these kind of things. And we embedded basically in the investment plans these enablers, these foundations, by linking them to the business initiative, ensuring they were properly sponsored and contributing value to the business owner and the business initiative. So that's about it for the strategic level. If you can move maybe to the next slide, Ludo. So the work at that level was actually quite successful, and we were able as well to transition that to execution. So basically, following this initial cycle in 2019, a few number of large-scale transformation programs were initiated nearly at the same time, which refocused a significant part of the investment bandwidth of the company, or the discretionary part of it, towards really achieving the company goals. The ability to transition that to execution, that was possible thanks to multiple factors. One is the role of the enterprise architect in the governance. So we are actually a department just sitting next to the portfolio management department, and our chief architect is part of the strategic portfolio management, and we have an enterprise architect in each of the portfolio to help, turning the vision into real concrete program and making sure they get funded and they focus on the right objectives as well. We were helped as well also by the organization capability to structure and manage and initiate large program, but also in a way, in that transition, we were also taking a little bit, maybe too much of the workload on us within enterprise architecture and relying on our solution architecture capabilities to help shaping and initiating these large transformation programs. So overall, at this stage, it was a success. But if you move to the next slide, there are also some point of attention, I would say, because this shift from the vision, the strategic level to the execution level, to be fair, did not really benefit yet from a fully mature domain architecture management practice, neither from a fully functioning operating model between our unit, enterprise architecture, and the other IT delivery units in Euroclear. And what we see from the ongoing execution, all the programs are now really underway, is that there are a number of things that we need to improve to make it sustainable. I mean, this process of, translating from strategy to execution to make it repeatable, sustainable, and also to secure a smooth execution and value creation from the various transformation programs. We face a number of issues like some gaps sometimes in the enablement planning of foundations. People who want to start maybe running before they can crawl, and it can lead to some problems. We also saw difficulties in terms of maybe syndicating at the mid-management level the use of this transversal foundation within the business programs. I mean, there was a good buy-in at the more senior level in the company, but at the mid-level was sometimes difficulties and energy to be put in order to actually make sure that this was happening within the various programs. Also, we launched quite a number of things in parallel. It's quite a transformation for the company. Agile, digital capabilities, business transformation programs, and synchronizing all of that, synchronizing also the maturity journey of these new foundations with their intended consumption in a given program has sometimes been a challenge, whereby we were just thinking that we could start using something, and in the end it's not at the right level of maturity, which creates issues in the execution. Also, for some areas which are maybe more emerging, less mature, not only in Euroclear, but also sometimes outside of Euroclear. And I'm thinking here, for instance, about the whole topic of operational resilience. We also realize we need to adopt different type of approaches. It's not necessarily about planning upfront a 3-year roadmap and you already know where you go. No, in some of these cases, we need to go step by step. We need to learn, adopt more a discovery and iterative approach, and adapt dynamically the plan to the learning you make in execution. So all these, I would say, teething issues, when you step back a little bit, we realize that the real structural response to this is to increase the maturity of our domain architecture management practice in Euroclear, and also to better embed the role of enterprise architecture into the delivery process, the role of the domain architects, if necessary, through governance as well in terms of solution designs and review of that. And finally, to also transition the solution architecture to delivery. Why? Because the model that was successful for the initial transition from strategy to execution cannot scale. We cannot just grow the architecture team to manage all solution architecture for the whole company. So the lesson learned from that is really that domain architecture is key. It's the linking pin between strategic intent and realization. A lot of the issues I briefly talked about here can actually be addressed by a real proactive engagement of the domain architect and the business architect within their domain, with their stakeholders, but also by establishing a real collaborative and trusted relationship with solution architects on the floor. It's a journey. We're not there yet. We have been started to focus on these two elements of improvement right now, and it's a real journey because we need to change on the enterprise architecture team. Also, the delivery needs to evolve. So it's a joint journey we have to go together. But we are, I would say, optimistic because so far we managed to deliver great value, and we really look forward to delivering even more value and also to provide good opportunities for our architects to grow. And this is the end of the presentation, so thank you.
So, well, I think we could probably spend more time on each topic, because I think it's all interesting stuff there. I think the story of Belfius and the story of Euroclear, and also the fact that Chris is highlighting the business-driven aspect to it. I think it makes sense. Just to wrap up.
Tom, before you start, so first of all, Jean-François, thanks a lot for your presentation. I think it was extremely clear. There are some questions in the chat box. One is from Marijn Driel. Maybe we can keep it at the end if there's no time, so we're gonna go a little bit over time. So if you can stay in the call, maybe that would be great. So Tom, back to you.
Yeah, so you can go to the next slide. So I can be quite short. I think it's what we hear indeed is that we both at the story from Belfius that we hear, and the story of Euroclear is what resonated to us at XPLUS is that indeed the domain architecture is a key pin, in a sense that strategy to execution, there's quite a role there for architects, I would say. I think that's the general conclusion. I think we also have the insight of Chris saying, let's keep it business driven at the end of the day, which is also sometimes a challenge as architects, in the sense that sometimes you have clear corporate strategies, sometimes maybe they are not there, but still we are pushed to make the bridge to delivery. So I think that's for me the two key takeaways. What we did, and I think that's also work we are doing at Euroclear, at Belfius as we speak, is that we try to shape indeed what is a key competencies of a domain architect. So we have a model in place, which I think we put it in place at Euroclear to also train, assess, and coach the people. But you see, it's some points were highlighted. It's indeed about looking further than the short-term project plan, but not too far-fetched, going all strategy exercises. So it's really a matter of finding the good balance in between. But I think Chris was mentioning that, also taking into account that's the engagement of the company. Where do we go to as a whole company? Can we take in this more let's say company ambitions as ESG, or more like the typical IT stuff, more on cyber security and so on. So things are moving, and this is also a bit the thing we say, this is the core of a domain architect, but that's where he plays a role. And he tries to, we see that more, it's a collaborative role. It's not the domain architect who sits in his, let's say, in his corner and comes up with the domain architecture. That's not how we see things moving anymore. It's really setting up collaboration, setting up the right network, and also a challenge to architect is also to go into the let's say more management perspective, more having the organizational impact also identified. So that's a bit how we structure a competencies on more the let's say the core architecture practices, but also how the decisiveness, the fact that you need to indeed have a commander basically to make decisions happen, and also very important interaction with others, with the stakeholder concerns and so on, and bringing more let's say the engagement of the company. I think Caroline is a perfect example of that. I think she breeds Belfius, and I think it's always engaging to have these people on board, I would say. So that's a bit the model we have. You can move to the next slide, Ludo. So this is basically a model we use to also, this is more detailed on how we consider being a good business domain architect, but this is basically something we have in place as I would say as key takeaway from the stories we heard. Then of course, I think from the polls we saw that it seems we have a lot of people who have a quite mature architecture organization in place. It doesn't always mean that you have to have dedicated domain architects in place, according to us. So it's also, that's the next slide, it's more on, okay, what do domain architectures contain? I think you can go to the next slide as well, Ludo. It's some key takeaways of what we consider as key points of a domain architecture. We called it architecture plateaus. I think indeed roadmap is indeed giving a direction, but we also tend to also focus in domain architecture on the planning, the steps, So we call it plateaus, which are indeed not written in stone things, but at least they give us paths to where to go. And also plateau, we also consider as being a state where you can stop, because things change, business changes, the IT components change, the technology changes. So, but we do see that as an added value of domain architecture to work with plateaus, and to also link it with the business in the sense of having use cases, give concrete examples, tell us which projects will favor from your domain architecture. Be pragmatic as well, and be concrete. That's the key takeaways we use for sure at Belfius, where I'm working currently. And then it's indeed, I think that's important. That's a bit different to us as well as compared to solution architecture. It's more focusing on the bigger impact, the organizational impact, which is there, and the fact that indeed it's road mapping. That's true, but it's concrete with also projects, when to do it, how to do it, with whom. I would say architecture is always responsible for budget, but then again, don't be afraid to also go that direction and make it, let's say, make it concrete. That's a bit how we saw domain architects and domain architecture. So that's a bit, and as explained by Caroline as well, communication. I think that's a bit the linking pin to our next breakfast session. Is we see architecture organization also evolving in a sense that with the agile transformations, with a lot of center of excellence, we say, okay, communities, guilds and chapters, or how to make the architectural mayonnaise stick. That's more on communication, how to make sure that these nice roadmaps and domain architectures that we produce, that they get also, how to say that, communicated throughout the organization, and how do you organize basically your architecture teams to ensure that this happens. I think it's also touched by Jean-François at Euroclear on saying, how do we make the link with the delivery? That's kind of the goal of the next breakfast session, which would be scheduled, let's say, after the summer holidays, September 24th.
Okay, so thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for to all the speakers. I remembered we had this one question from Marijn Driel. I don't know if Marijn is still in the call, but the question was to you, Jean-François, about no business functional approach in Euroclear presentation at all. And the question is, who deals with it?
Actually, it was maybe a shortcut in the presentation, because the enterprise architecture team includes a dedicated business architecture function, and that works hand in hand with the domain architect. So both, I would say, the business architect is going to model, the services, the process, understanding the business roadmap, a bit like Chris explained. At the same time, the domain architect is looking more at the IT side of things. And create the artifacts more from a functional point of view. Actually, they work hand in hand in nearly everything we do, be it at strategic level or at domain architecture level. We have a tandem, business architects and domain architects working really hand in hand to provide that more functional oriented view.
Okay, so super. Thanks a lot. As usual, for the people that are used to this presentation, we will send over the next coming days the link to the presentation, and also the recording will be available. I really thank the presenters, Caroline van Kampout, Chris Peltier, Jean-François, and also Tom. I thank as well Bart van Passel to help to set it up and to drive it. So happy with what I have heard, and me myself, I'm not an architect, but I'm learning every time. So these are highly valuable input to me as well. So with that, I would like to end this session. Wish you a nice Friday, a good weekend, and a good holiday as well. So thanks a lot, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.